Some ridiculous sounds on here.
So professional, Cow. Come on.
What up, Chad?
Chad, Cow.
What's up, guys?
Where would this podcast be if this was a professional podcast?
Well, it'd be a lot more boring, that's for sure.
There'd be a lot less swears, too.
The PG rated Chad B, that'd be no fun at all.
Go fuck yourself.
What did you guys think about? Did you see that THORChain mentioned in that Deloitte World Economic Forum article or this research report or something like that? It's so strange, and I can't really put my finger on why it's so weird. Just the whole article itself. I don't know if you guys actually checked this out and looked at the references and things like that. The THORChain reference, it makes some kind of good reference to THORChain, saying like, oh yeah, proof of solvency and just some other talking points we have. But then the reference to that at the end of the article, it's number 28, I think. It's one of those AI written scam articles, that like I'm sure you've all seen this. It's just where they're just randomly generated and they put them out. They blast them out to 100 different like BS crypto news sites, and they're like, "Is THORChain the next Polkadot?" Or like this particular batch of them, which was pretty big around like November, I think, was one in particular that I think this project, Big Eyes, whatever the heck that is, paid for, because every single one of these articles would mention, is THORChain and Big Eyes like competitors with Polkadot? Like, what's the difference? Like, it's just like things that just they don't really make sense, obviously, from anyone that is like paying attention. So I just like looking through the references in this article, it was just strange because it wasn't just the THORChain reference that was like a weird scammy sort of reference, not any kind of like official documentation or like a real article or something like that, just a scam article. But then other sources are also in this similar vein of like, they're not, I don't think these articles are even written by real people. I'm pretty sure they're just these are all either like marketing pieces or like they're written by AI or what. So like I don't understand like what this whole report thing is and why it exists, but it's just a really weird scammy vibe in the first place.
Yeah, I hadn't seen it at all until like literally like seconds before I jumped into this space, and I'm like actually trying to read the article a little bit now and wrap my head around what the fuck they're even talking about. I mean, I think it sounds like I mean, I haven't read the whole thing. I just looked at this one particular page 34, of this 110-page document put out there by the World Economic Forum. And I think in this particular page, they're just talking about proof of solvency and in the context of like centralized exchanges that make sense, proof of assets, proof of liabilities, proof of solvency, like all this kind of stuff. But I really don't understand why it references THORChain in this particular case, because one, it's not a centralized exchange, and I guess it does have proof of solvency, because it does. But I don't know. Even like the other link below it talks about cash gold, which I've never heard of.
Yeah. No, exactly. Isn't it just like the weirdest scammy vibe where it's just like, it seems like it was not written by a person, like the entire report? And maybe it was just me, but I definitely got that vibe.
I feel that vibe, yeah. I mean, I've only kind of glanced at it too. I saw a comment you posted somewhere and just glanced right before this also. But yeah, I mean, it feels like it feels worse than like even a ChatGPT or something generated article. It just feels like a bunch of slapped together like weird sentences from various places that don't quite fit together. But yeah, I don't know, pretty weird, but kind of cool to see it in there.
I don't really know what the World Economic Forum even is. itself. I was like, is that something that is legit, or is that something that's not legit?
You will eat the bug in the pod and trade on the THORChain. I don't know. I just see people posting all about it on Twitter all the time. I haven't gone way too deep into that. I'm sure there's people here who are like absolutely jumping up and being like, "Oh my god, you don't
It's
know about the plot of the World Economic Forum."
well,
Honestly, I don't
it
really care.
definitely is a
But
real organization with
yeah,
actual like powerful people involved. The part that's like too up to your interpretation is whether that's like a giant global conspiracy of lizard people trying to get you to eat bugs, or if it's people like genuinely trying to fix the systems of society. But it's definitely a real a real organization for sure.
I've heard about it in the past, but I never really like paid any attention, you know. But
you're not a member of the World Economic Forum.
They're the ones that are like, "You will own nothing and be happy." Like that was like a
Yeah,
real
yeah. That's those
that was
people.
a real quote from somebody in it. But stuff like that, yeah.
I know they say a bunch
mm,
of like weird thing. I mean, like obviously, like they say a lot of like controversial things. So yeah, it's just so strange that they put out like reports like this, but the things that are just saying nonsensical things. It's just so strange. I'm just wondering like how has it come to this? Why are we in this situation in the first
yeah,
place?
yeah. I mean, right now I'm looking at their site, and like they're talking about their Davos manifesto about showing zero tolerance for corruption and upholding human rights and things that everybody would agree with no solutions.
Don't worry, they like our proof of solvency.
I
We're
guess.
safe.
Well, I'm glad we finally got the World Economic Forum, whatever the fuck that really means. As if it took as if it's really that hard to figure out that when you're holding other people's money that there should be proof of solvency. I guess as if that's like a hard thing to wrap your head around or come to conclusion of.
Yeah, that's why they paid Deloitte to write a report on it. And then Deloitte didn't write a report on it. They just got ChatGPT to get some references.
Just some random fucking.
Oh wait, this is due tomorrow. Oh man.
Yeah. They reference some scam article that was also probably generated by AI. It's just
Hey,
AI just
that's
generating
literally
crap
what
by
it is.
AI.
It's just one AI writing the reference and the other AI quoting that reference. Uh, that's journalism today.
Yeah,
I'm
that's really
catching
the
a
problem
case.
is like the people in these power positions like don't even have a clue what they're talking about. And that seems like the source of many of these problems.
I'm kind of curious to understand what the actual income is for the World Economic Forum. Is it just like NATO, funding the whole thing, or did they actually sell something? I have no idea. Weird,
Yeah, I don't want to
very
riff on it too
weird.
much because there's definitely people who know way more about this than me. And so let's just move on to other things that we can actually. I mean, yeah, it was just interesting that they wrote about it in the report, and it also just had like the strangest, most scammy vibe. So obviously, whenever you see like some kind of report or something like that, you should check the references and like see what it is that they're looking at, and like make your own determination of whether it's scammy or not. I think it's super scammy, like what they put out. So I mean, like I'm not supportive of referencing THORChain in a terribly written article that makes no reference to actually anything that is like been accomplished here. It's only just quoting an AI generated scam article paid to shill another uh, crypto project which does nothing. So yeah, very 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 strange. But
Agreed.
yeah, I figured today we can talk about two of the new ADRs which have been proposed. We can kind of go through what the ADRs are and some of the context around them and the changes that are going to be made if they go through and just the state of the whole thing. So there's two new ADRs, number 7 and number 8. And that's how we'll refer to them. And yeah, let's just go through them one at a time. We can start with ADR7, which is to change the fund migration interval and the churn interval to increase the fund and churn interval. Uh, so Chad, you know a lot more about like how the churns work in terms of like the fund migration and churn interval. So could you explain like what exactly those two concepts actually mean?
Yeah. So the validators we have, they have these Asgard vaults, and each Asgard vault has about 20, approximately 20 validators in each, more or less. Maybe a little bit less now because there's 84 validators today. But anyways, approximately that. And so each one of these validators has, runs these Asgard vaults with official signatures, and everybody has a part of a private key, so to speak. That's not entirely correct, but we'll just imagine that's correct just for simplicity purposes. And so every time the validator set changes, we need to, push out, make the TSS shares, of the people who are leaving the network to make them invalid and unuseful. And we need to, the new people coming in, we need them to have, TSS shares that do work, right, in a way that, is secure and all these things. So every time we change our validator set, we have to generate a new TSS shares, a new vaults. And then when we do that, we have to migrate the old vaults to the new vaults. So it's moving every sat in the entire network from an old location to a new location. From typically from 5 volts to a new set of 5 volts, most commonly. That can be 6 volts. That could go down to 4, depending upon the change of the total number of validators in the network. But generally speaking, it's like 5 to 5 or something like this. And that's just done to make sure that we don't like have keys that just existing out in the internet somewhere that could one day be reutilized to steal funds into the future. That's called TSS like resharing, which we don't do. Other projects might do that, like Dfinity does it, I think, but we don't do that because it doesn't make any sense economically or security minded at all. So every time we churn, we have to create new vaults, move all the funds over because we have a new validator set. So the churn interval just dictates like how often we actually churn. And I think right now it's like approximately 3 or 3.5 days. We do a churn and we kick out old validators and we pull in new validators, and we just do this process because we want to make sure that like there's no kind of capture happening. And we want to make sure new people come in, there's competition to come in through bond sizes, blah, 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 all these things. The migration interval states basically how fast we churn in terms of like how much time is how many times we churn, like how many times we migrate, and how fast that migration is. And so we generally don't migrate everything in a single transaction, largely because of a few different reasons. One reason is in the off random crazy scenario where we are churning to a location we can't actually control. We don't send all the money at once. And so we would have at least some kind of warning or ability to stop that if that were to happen. That's never happened in the history of the network. I doubt it will ever actually happen, to be honest with you. But you put the security in there just for giggles in a sense. But the other and more useful, more important reason is to make sure that we don't have all the funds in flight. Like if we were to move 100% of the Bitcoin in a single transaction, then all the Bitcoin is being put into a single transaction. And then if you wanted to reuse or do swaps and trades, and all of it's in flight right now, and so that kind of creates complexities around like how do we actually send out this Bitcoin that somebody's doing a regular swap with. Technically, it's possible with like how UTXOs work, blah blah blah. But like, we don't want to make assumptions about how individual chains work. But we don't know what chains we're using now versus also into the future, and so we want to make sure that we just don't have all of the funds in flight at any given moment. And so we break it up currently into like I think 5 or 6 steps. And each time we do approximately 20-ish% of the funds are being moved at any given time, and then we do the migration interval itself. And so over the course of approximately 6 hours or so, I think it is, or no, actually, I think it's like an hour or something like this. But over the course of like 6 hours or so, we move from the old Asgards to the new Asgards, and that's what the migration interval is. So now that we understand like what the churn interval is and what the migration interval is, now let's talk about why the change. ADR to begin with was that wallets, when they send in funds to the network, they have to look up what the vaults are to send funds to, and obviously you don't want to send to an old vault, right? A vault that's being retired, in the process of being retired, is fine. You can send to an old and retiring vault, and everything will be still work, and you don't lose any funds or anything like this. But once a vault is retired and there's no more funds in it, at that point, if you send funds to that vault, you're basically sending it into a black hole, and you will not get your funds. And so what ended up happening was, I think it was Trust Wallet who had a bug in their code. They cached inbound addresses when they shouldn't have, and they send funds to an old address that they shouldn't have sent them to, and they burned some funds due to that software bug. And so Trust Wallet was very much upset with this notion, and we're upset with THORChain for whatever reasons, and kind of place pressure on specifically the Nine Realms team to make some alterations to make it less likely that people will send funds to an old vault. And the way that's being accomplished is just by increasing the churn rate and increasing the migration interval, and therefore the time that you would have to get wrong is increased, and therefore less likely to send funds to an old vault. Publicly, I've always said that you should never cache inbound addresses for more than 15 minutes. Everything should be, looked up every 15 minutes or so for other reasons as well around economic security of the network. So that's the background here, is that the idea is to increase the churn interval, increase the migration interval, to make it more difficult for UIs and wallets and what have you to fuck it up and send funds to an old inactive vault that was retired, hours ago, yesterday, or even we've even seen people send funds to a vault that was retired a month ago, and they still, have some code bug that caused them to get the wrong address to send funds to. Does that make sense?
Yeah. There's a couple different reasons I think behind that, and I don't think that Trust Wallet is caching the addresses, but it's always possible that someone makes a change, starts caching an address, or like the transaction is constructed and someone just leaves it on their phone, or the construction is the transaction's made in your XDFI wallet. You walk away. Next time you go look at your wallet, that transaction's still there. If you send it and approve it, then your funds just go to the old vault address and it's just gone. So this proposed change would make it easier to recover those funds, and so Chad, this would make it so that it's just a longer period where the funds are retiring. So there wouldn't need to be any kind of recovery process. It would just be sending to an old vault that is still in the process of retiring. So then those funds are just processed normally. Is that the new behavior if this ADR passes?
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, and hopefully I don't have it wrong, that once the churn starts, you basically are moving from a 6-hour window to a 12-hour window of sending it to an old retiring vault. The churn interval increasing from 3.5 days to I think 9 is the suggestion, or something like this. Just means we're churning less often, and therefore the odds of you doing a swap during a churn is reduced because we're churning less frequently.
Yeah, so this change also bumps up the churn interval to 9 days, and currently it is 3 days. There was a period where it was 7 days, so 9 days being probably the longest churn interval that we've really had as a network, but also makes sense for a more mature network that has a majority of the standby nodes already churned in.
Yeah, are there any arguments like what's the argument against longer churn intervals, if there really are any? It just like
there are arguments for it and there are arguments against it? So another argument for it is that if we are churning less frequently, we are spending less room from the reserve to fund the gas that's used to migrate these funds from Vault A to Vault B, and we spend I want to say it's like, hopefully I don't get this wrong, I think it's like 1,000 rune per churn from the reserve to pay for the gas to move all these funds around. And so if we do it less often, then we're obviously paying less rune per year overall. That's one of the arguments for doing this. One of the arguments against doing this is that with less of a churn, That means that that getting out of the network is more takes more time. So if you need to do some sort of hardware maintenance because something's broken on your bare metal or your AWS box or whatever it is, you have a longer time you have to operate, and you might get more slashes because you have to wait until you're out of the network. Yeah, I mean, you can make a whole host of reasons why you shouldn't do this and a whole host of reasons why you should do this, and it just becomes quite nuanced and arguable.
I believe it also makes it more difficult for a node that wants to churn out and do maintenance to come back in.
Right.
There's a shortened period in which they would be able to do that, and then if you miss a churn, then it's 9 days. So there's much more potential to lose income as a node operator. Like say you churn out and then you miss that churn in, you got to wait another 9 days to come back, because there's a much shorter period between when you would churn out and come back in, if I'm correct.
Right. And it also means that most of the time for most people when they get churned out, or at least like a good percentage of them, they get churned out due to age, meaning they've been an active validator for a long enough period of time. They're the oldest validator in the current since they've been in the network. And so the amount of time you get before you get kicked out of the network just for age alone has been increased by 3x, because you go from a 3-day churn to a 9-day churn. So it's probably increased by approximately 3x. And so you're not going to get churned out as much, it's just from age alone. You might get churned out because of you have a lot of splash points or some other reasons. But that's one of the another one of the benefits is that you're spending more time in when you get in, right? But then also another one of the arguments is that well, if the churn is longer, that means that the demand to get churned in when you want to get churned in is higher, because if you don't make this churn, you have to wait 9 days for the next opportunity. So the bond wars becomes kind of increased in a sense, right? Because you want to make sure you're in the next churn, because if you don't, you have to wait another 9 days. And so maybe you'd buy more rune to increase your bond to make sure you get in this churn and not wait, another 9 days on lost profits and income and that kind of stuff, right? But then at the same time, if we have every once in a long while, we have a major churn where a huge quantity of nodes get churned out for reasons of people are offline or a whole host of different things, like huge slash points, blah, 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 whatever. And then the amount of time it takes to rebuild the validator set from 70 nodes to back to 85 becomes a month or two, right? And that has effects on the network security and the bond and the yield for LPs and nodes. There's so many ways this affects this. None of these ways are very significant, I would argue. It's not none of these things are make or break. They're just a bunch of different small changes.
Well, it sounds like with changing that parameter, perhaps at some point it would also be changed, how many churn in and out at a time, maybe, because if it's so much less frequent, if that was a problem, I don't know, maybe change it from 3 to 4 or something. I don't know.
Yeah. So I think it's set right now from memory. If 3 get churned out, then it'll add 2 to that number. Whatever gets churned out, that adds 2. And so it'll look for 5 to be churned in. All right. So if 2 get churned out, then it'll look for 4 to get churned in. And we can increase that number from that number from 2 to be 3. So if the 3 get churned out, then 6 get churned in, or vice, or whatever. We can tweak that if we wanted to. And by doing so, you're creating less competition on the bond wars, right? Because if more people are churning in, then the line to get churned in terms of bond requirements is lowered, right? And so that becomes part of the debate or argument.
Also, I saw someone ask the question, what is a churn? So a churn is the process by which new validators enter the network and then old validators leave the network. So it's a process that right now happens every 3 days. And that's what happens when the vaults change to new addresses. So new addresses are created. There's basically a bond war, an auction to see who's going to be the new validators that join the network. And then some old validators leave the network, new TSS key shares are generated, and then the funds migrate to a new vault. So that's what the entire churn is. Whoever has the most rune gets added to the validator set, and then whoever has the least rune in the current validator set leaves, as well as the oldest node. And if you didn't update or if you're the worst performing node, then you get churned out. So there's a number of reasons why you can why you can leave, and then you have to bond in again, and you basically have to be one of the top performers in the auction to join the active validator set. So the churn is kind of the core of THORChain's vault security. So if anyone was confused as to like what the actual churn is, but I think that pretty much covers the ADR, and likely a vote will start on that fairly soon, I think. And yeah,
not sure if
yep.
Oleg or Wizard had any on stage, so I'm not sure if they wanted to contribute anything to this particular topic.
Hey, thanks for taking. I don't have one specific to this, but if I could ask a question about something else, or did you want to stay on?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So I've been looking at a lot of dexes, and one in particular that's like really stood out to me is Trader Joe on Avalanche, and they have like this novel like upgrade to Uniswap V3 concentrated liquidity model that's like gotten their volume traded to like TVL ratio almost above 1, which is incredible. I was wondering, is THORChain looking to do something similar? Has THORChain explored something similar just to, like, I think there's like a great flywheel effect here where you have more yields to LPs, then more people will want a liquidity pool, and then thereby like, increasing like liquidity and swaps for users, where there's like less slippage, just something like that. What are your thoughts?
Well, so I'm not too privy on Trader Joe's like concentrated liquidity change, and so there might be elements to that I'm missing. So I don't want to say that I'm an expert on Trader Joe, but generally when I've looked at the idea of concentrated liquidity, and I've been somewhat public about it in the past. When I first saw it happen, I think Uniswap V3 was the first one to do this idea of concentrated liquidity, where you can have an up to 40x, capital efficiency for liquidity providers and such. It sounded incredibly dumb to me, to be honest with you, like ridiculously stupid. And the reason why that is because in like Uniswap V3's case, you are literally building the most perfect tool to fuck over your LPs. Like you could not imagine a more effective tool to fuck over your LPs as hard as concentrated liquidity, which is why in Uniswap V3's case, like most people, like I think the report that I saw like a year or so ago, that was like 67% or something like that of LPs on Uniswap V3 are like at a loss, right? And that's because effectively what happens is if you're a passive LP, you're not utilizing concentrated liquidity, all the yield that you would get gets pulled from you, and it gets pulled out via analyzing markets and constantly adjusting their concentrated liquidity position on X, Y, and Z, and it's actually quite harmful to a protocol. I would argue, especially to the LPs, and so it doesn't make sense for me from what I've seen. Maybe Trader Joe is doing something different, and maybe there's some component that I'm missing, and I'm happy to learn more about it, or somebody explain to me what I'm missing, or what have you. But concentrated liquidity, it's an attempt to be more capital efficient, and it's an attempt to be, to get better pricing, I guess, in some ways or form, depending on if they're using like JIT or something like this. But like, even JIT on Uniswap V3 is kind of a joke. Nobody really thinks that it actually works. Yeah, I'm very skeptical that this, just by adding concentrated liquidity, that the trade volume is going to increase as much as you're suggesting. That doesn't make logical sense to me at all. So I would want to dive deeper into the claim and how or why that would be true. Because just because you make concentrated liquidity, it doesn't mean that the trade volume would naturally increase. It just means that the how LPs make money has been shifted, not so much trade volume. Because a trader, I don't think it matters all that much to the trader. Like they're still getting the same swap fee of like 20 bips or something like this, and they're still getting the same price more or less, to my knowledge. And maybe I'm missing something. So somebody please explain to me.
Yeah. Well, from observation, it looks like their volumes have skyrocketed. And I think like part of it is I think you have like a pretty decent understanding of what concentrated liquidity is. The only difference with Trader Joe is I think like if whatever liquidity is in like in a particular bin, everyone kind of gets the same price until all the liquidity either goes from asset A to asset B like that. Um, and it just makes the volume more efficient in that bin. So like if there's back and forth, then like, now you have I think I really do think it will increase the volume substantially.
But why?
That's
Why would that increase the volume?
Well, there's more volume at a particular price for one,
Why would there be more volume in a particular price?
because so whoever the LP is selecting a particular range to put all their liquidity in.
Yeah, but the price is the price. Like the price is what the market deems the price of, AVAX or GMX or whatever the asset we're talking about. Like just because it's concentrated liquidity doesn't mean there's more demand for a particular price. It just means that the price is still going to be the price, and the interest of trading at the particular price is the same, no matter what the yield that an LP may or may not make on it, right?
I think you're correct in saying that it won't, like the first order effect is not to increase the volume right away, but if there's more volume that's in that liquidity, there's more available. And because there's more available, traders would naturally gravitate towards that because they have to pay less slippage. Versus like on THORChain, the slippage is enormous. Like, to do like a 10,000 rune trade,
Yeah,
you're
but
taking a couple.
the slippage, as I understand it, and again, I'm not a Trader
Yeah,
Joe expert, is a set fixed price of I think it's 20 bips or 30 bips, something like this.
that's just the fee. That's not slippage.
I thought you were referring to that. So what are you referring to then?
I guess in an XY equals K model, you take a certain amount of slippage based on how much volume is there, correct? Like if there were 10 units of asset A and 10 units of asset B, you take out 1 unit of asset A and roughly like, you're taking 10% slippage,
You're
right?
talking about the slippage of the pool, not the slippage of the price. Is it?
Yeah, I mean, I see them as equivalent, but I guess maybe they're not. But for example, like in Trader Joe, if there's, 1 unit available in that bin for someone to trade, then you could have 5 people, like one person coming in to buy, one person coming in to sell, one person coming in to buy, one person coming in to sell, taking zero slippage, they all get the same price.
Hmm.
And it's like substantially increased the volume there. So I was wondering, like, like over the long term, more and more volume is going to gravitate towards concentrated liquidity dexes. Would hate to see THORChain get left behind, given that it's such a novel concept to do this all cross chain.
Yeah, I'd be nervous about it because I'd be nervous about screwing over our LPs if we were to do that. That'd be my first
Yeah,
hesitation.
but like as an LP, you have the option to not concentrate all your liquidity. You
Right,
can
but
spread it out.
if you don't, you get screwed. That's the
If
thing.
you don't, you get screwed.
Yeah, because in the end, what's happening is so say you have a trade coming in, and say that trade is gonna pay $30 in fees, right? The question becomes who gets the $30, right? And if you are an active validator, you'll probably get 28 of that dollars, and then $2 might go to the passive guy, and just reallocating of the $30 of income that's coming from this particular trade or swap, who's getting it. Now, in a completely passive system like what THORChain is, where you don't constantly adjust your concentrated liquidity into certain ranges or whatever, everybody gets an equal share relative to the percentage of the pool that you own, right? And so you don't need to be a mathematician. You don't need to be constantly looking at the price and constantly making transactions and constantly adjusting your position all the time. Everybody gets the same.
Hey, Chad, if I could,
I disagree
yeah, I
here.
would
I
disagree
think
too.
like in a
Can I phrase something that might help Chad understand this a little bit better? Because I agree with you,
Sure.
our wizard, which is Chad.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
just a
Go ahead.
trade-off. I've done concentrated liquidity provision myself, and I agree it has a high likelihood of screwing over LPs. But you got to realize that the trade-off is if you have a ton more transaction throughput, then that $30 of fees that you might get could easily become $90. So you're trading off total volume, which does give more money to the liquidity providers with the chance of getting screwed through effectively impermanent loss, right? It's just a trade-off. So it's not a clear-cut win to say that concentrated liquidity is absolutely idiotic, because if you gain a whole bunch more transaction volume, because people absolutely are getting lower slippage, right? They're getting far lower slippage,
but objectively, Uniswap LPs are getting screwed.
I don't know.
You can argue, but they're getting more trade volume. But like from studies have shown, and I can find the actual research if you want me to. But like most LPs on Uniswap are losing.
So I wouldn't doubt the most LPs. What concentrated liquidity does is it turns LPs into day traders. You have to be an incredibly on point LP to be able to make profit.
Right.
And that does one thing. It does one thing is it makes it such that LPs are no longer just kind of layman, anyone that just wants to earn yield. It makes it a professional endeavor. However, there is a flip side to that. Right. The flip side of that is on the trader side, on the person that wants to use the swap, they get far lower slippage. And that's what increases the volume, which makes it appealing to the LPs, but it makes it appealing to LPs that can maintain the position, adjust the positions, and actually be on point with it. Like I said, it becomes almost like day trading. So I don't do it. I don't do it because I realize what it takes, and I can see how to be successful, and I just don't have the stomach or the time to study how to do it successfully. But know that I don't think it's a clear-cut loss, because you're right. Most will fail, just like most miners in proof of work are at a loss, because it's the ones that actually know how to do it, know how to be capital efficient, know how to be competitive, that will succeed. Does it mean that mining is fruitless? Is pointless? No, right? It's a different way of doing it that admittedly brings in the more professional style LP providers, but it's not a clear-cut loss. That I fundamentally would disagree that it's a clear-cut loss, and proof is in the pudding from the viewpoint of the total success.
A clear-cut loss to whom?
To the entire network. Right? I look at it from a network point of view, right? To Uniswap v3, not a clear-cut loss. Yes, to majority of LPs, sure, because a majority of LPs do not know how to provide liquidity in a concentrated liquidity environment, because it is super tricky. I don't disagree. You are going to get screwed if you are not on point and not studying the moves of the market. You are going to get screwed. But most LPs getting screwed doesn't mean that it's not a clear-cut. It does not mean that it's a clear-cut loss for the network as a whole, to drive volume to the network, to get people using it as opposed to centralized services. And let's remember what our North Star is: get people off the centralized services and make THORChain competitive. So I'll leave it at that. I'll let RW Wizard continue the argument. I got to bounce for work, but awesome chat, guys. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, Paul.
Is the argument here mostly just that if the fees go down for swappers, is that really the end result here, where it's just like, to take away the concentrated liquidity part of it, where it's just like, if we just decrease the fees, then that is the direction the network wants to head in? I think that's kind of a obviously true statement, but is that kind of the core of the thing here? Just dropping fees?
No, it's not. I think one is to allow LPs to earn more on whatever assets they have, and two is to allow traders to be able to get a better trade, a better price, without moving the market too much. But like, to add on to what the other guy was saying, like, I think a big part of this is so, like, if you look at Trader Joe, one of the things that they're trying to implement is something called auto pool, and I think it allows you to just automatically, like, if the price moves a little bit, it'll reallocate, like, it'll take out your pool and then like reallocate it closer to where the current price is trading, so you don't have to worry about it. So that, like, there are ways to get around this. And I think, like, the second thing is LPs are on some level always getting screwed, right? There's a spectrum. If the price of one asset really moves one way, you're taking impermanent loss. So, like, it's just a matter of how much impermanent loss you want to take when you're doing concentrated liquidity. But I don't see it as like a total like loss for the system. I think like most people stand to gain. It's not so obvious to me that it's just like a total no.
I would say that most people stand to lose, and there's going to be a few LPs who are data scientists and day traders, whatever, that have complex software that they've written that will constantly adjust their LP position, and those people will do extremely well. And that's we see that same thing on Uniswap A3, where there's like 10% of LPs are making.
See, that's not really the case, because if let's say volume increases by 10x. So like in your example, you said 28 goes to like whoever's concentrated in 2 goes to the rest. But
Yeah.
that case, on the flip side of it, is you were only bringing in $3 before, and you're splitting that evenly, right? So like, while the pie is larger,
I think
it's
the
not.
thing that I'm missing, that I don't understand, and I apologize, is why constant liquidity would create an increase in trade volume. I don't think I quite understand that. I think I'm missing
So
something.
like right now, like I have a bag of room, right? But almost none of it I've gotten by swapping on THORChain. Like it's come from other places, because the size that I wanted to take is like, it doesn't make sense to take like 5% slippage on a trade, right? With concentrated liquidity, I would be able to make that trade. That volume is now going to THORChain rather than like trading Rune on a centralized exchange like Kraken or whatever. It's because those spreads come down when you have that liquidity concentrated in a particular price range.
So you're saying that the fees that you pay, the swap fee that you pay in a concentrated liquidity model, would be far lower, which means that would garner more trade volume because the fees are cheaper, right? And the increased trade volume from the fees being cheaper would be greater than the loss in fees from the lower fees you're being charged. That's what you're saying. Do I understand you correctly?
I think so, yeah. By fee, do you mean like what the protocol takes from the swap, like a 0.2% fee? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like whatever. Like in our case, we
Okay, so
do.
that's not what I'm saying.
I'm talking about like in our case, we use a slip-based fee model, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how much we charge in fees relative to the size of your trade versus the depth of the pool. And in Uniswap, or I think in Trader Joe's case, they're generally, from my understanding, and I could be wrong, is they use a simple XYK where they're taking like, I think 20 or 30 bits, whatever the quantity is. I think it depends on the pool and other things. But like, I think in some, it's like they take 5 bits, I think, in like some of the stablecoin swaps or something like that. But they have a static fee that's not dynamic to the amount of LPs or the amount of things. So I don't understand.
So there's that fee, but then there's also like, let's say the pool is like 5 units each of asset A, asset B, right? If I take asset A out by depositing one of asset B, right?
Yeah.
Then
so you got 6 of one and now 4 of the other, you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I won't get exactly 1 back. I'm gonna get like something way smaller than 1, just to balance it out. Versus if there was 60, if let's say there was 50 and 50, and I were to take 1 out, and now there's 49 and 51 or whatever, I'm gonna get a lot more for that 1 asset that I deposited than I would in the first case, because there's more volume. There's more
Right.
the depth is larger. That's what I'm saying. Those spreads really come down because of concentrated liquidity. I'm not really talking about the 0.2% like fee that they take off the trade. That's still going to be there.
Yeah. So then in that scenario, then if you have a pool in Trader Joe and there's 5 units on one side and 5 units on another side, and the total LPs, whether you're passive or active or whatever, and does the depth of those things change as you do concentrated liquidity? In that, like, because you have a smaller range, instead of contributing 1 unit to both sides, you're contributing 1.2 mathematically, even though you're only actually contributing 1 on both sides. But mathematically, it computes it as if it's like 1.2. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, in effect, yeah. If that's what you choose to do as an LP, and you want to like tighten your range up by that much, but like every LP can decide how tight they want to be and where they want to concentrate their liquidity and stuff.
Yeah. And so I know Oleg's got something to say. Oleg, you wanted to contribute something.
Just a quick consideration, specifically on that topic. I had questions for ADR7, but we can come back to that later. I've looked at Trader Joe, and like, as Paul was saying, you allow or you impose that your LPs become active professional LPers. Let's not forget that Trader Joe is on Arbitrum and AVAX. Like, those are chains working at the second level. THORChain mains volume comes between like Bitcoin, Rune, and Ethereum, much slower chains. So I don't even think it's like possible, just because of the nature of the chains that THORChain enables to focus too much energy on that, just because you can't be an active or have a complex trading strategy or LP strategy based on a 10 minutes blockchain.
Well, I think you could do concentrated liquidity on the Rune side. So if you deposit it, if you're a dual sider, you couldn't do this for Savers, right? Savers is like to the point that you're making. It would take 10 minutes to adjust your position and that your LP position, and that would be probably too slow to be viable or usable. But if you were, a dual sider and you have, you produce both BTC and Rune to be an LP, you could use the Rune address to adjust your concentrated liquidity position on the Rune side, so that we could do within 5 seconds, which maybe that's quick enough. Probably is quick enough.
Perhaps just something to consider, because I know like Arbitrum is near zero cost or zero fees. Even the cents, they cost like 3 cents. I think that's like 10x what a basic Arbitrum transaction costs. So just something to keep in mind as well, just the limitations of the external chains that we work with.
Yeah. So, I mean, in THORChain's case, so we already have this idea of virtual pool depths, right? And we've used that in the past with synthetic assets, for example, where when computing you put in X number of coins, and we're going to try to calculate Y in terms of the number of coins you're going to receive on the other side. And that's all done by the slip-based feed model. And if we want to, and we've done this in the past to give you a better trade, meaning you're getting more Y for your X in a sense, we can do that just by multiplying or increasing the depth of the pool mathematically. Like it's set to a specific number of Bitcoin, but we can double the amount of Bitcoin, double the amount of Rune mathematically internal to our when it does its calculations. And we actually do this for synthetics. So like if we really wanted to entice more trading on THORChain via dropping its fees, right? I think it's what concentrated liquidity is trying to do. If I'm understanding our wizard correctly, and I hope I am, we can do that just by adjusting the create a virtual pool for Bitcoin trades, and so we could double the pool depth mathematically, which would effectively have the fees, or it's something that's definitely not linear like that, but to keep it simple, we'll just call it linear. And so you can have the fees that you're paying when in those trades and enticing more trades because it's cheaper, blah blah blah. We can do that, but then the question becomes, okay, well, if we do that, then the income of the nodes and the income of the LPs is also going to be halved. Is that something we want to do? Do we think that the increased trade volume would result in, even though we're paying half in fees, we'll get more than double the trade volume, and therefore it would be mathematically profitable for the LPs or the nodes to do so? And we can have a discussion and debate in the community about whether that makes sense or doesn't make sense. People can have different views on this topic, I'm sure.
Yeah, honestly, empirically, it shows that your LPs would profit more, even though they're taking less fees.
Yeah, you're saying that the trade volume increase would be greater than the losses that you would experience on a per trade level.
Correct.
Yeah, and maybe that's true. I to be honest, I don't really have a clear understanding if that would be true or not, and we can debate about this.
Yeah, to me, it just seems more like a function of there being less more volume going through the pool, and less of an effect of there being concentrated. It's the second order effect of there being concentrated liquidity is fees are lower, so there's more volume. When in reality, there's other ways to turn fees down and increase that volume, where it doesn't need to be through a concentrated liquidity model.
Same thing with JIT or just-in-time liquidity, which is something that Uniswap does, and I think Chainflip is doing it as well, and maybe TraderJoe does it as well. I'm not really quite sure, but just-in-time liquidity effectively allows you to change your position, your LP position on an incoming trade, so that you adjust it right before a trade, right? And that makes sense because it gives you more concentrated liquidity, and it gives you better pricing, so that if there's fluctuations in market price, you can adjust more quickly. In our case, we don't do that, and we do actually something very different. And the difference is that we use synthetics to arbitrage these things. So instead of adjusting LP positions and then concentrating income on the LP side, to the individuals who are having this kind of active relationship with the network. We're doing it through our bots being able to trade quickly and efficiently within one block to adjust fees and adjust, not just fees, but adjust depths of the pools to correct prices and that kind of stuff. And for me, that makes more logical sense, and maybe I'm missing something, but from my perspective, it makes more logical sense because you are creating more volume to correct the price rather than trying to reduce volume and just concentrate on just repositioning LP positions in new ranges and that kind of thing. I think that's more profitable for the network. One is you're trying to like abstract income from the regular LPs and you're trying to give it to the more active LPs. And the other is like you're still acquiring the goal of keeping the pool price to mimic the market price, but you're doing it in a way that doesn't, disadvantage your LPs who are providing that liquidity to begin with. So it becomes like an interesting conversation and debate. And I don't think necessarily that I'm necessarily right or wrong, but it's an interesting topic to talk about.
Yeah. Just one final thing. I got to jump off. I'll listen to the recording later. I just want to say, I hope we're not confusing fees, because like fees it's like if you're paying the 0.2% fee, whether the pool is 10 units deep or 100 units deep, it doesn't matter. You're still paying that fee. But the price benefit that you get from swapping one asset in the first case versus the second case, where there's 10 units versus 100 units, is much more substantial if there's 100 units versus 10 units, right? And so that's what I'm calling slippage, not necessarily fee. That slippage is much smaller. And
So
like just to address this,
maybe what I'm not understanding though in the traders, and I apologize if I'm missing something here, is that to my understanding, I could be wrong, is that it doesn't actually matter the depth of the pool in that context, whether there's 10 units deep or 100 units deep. Because the mechanism of computing the value of what you're putting in X tokens and you're getting out Y tokens is a constant. It doesn't actually really matter.
No.
10
So
what am I missing?
If it's 100 units deep, you can trade 100 units at that same price, versus if it's 10 units deep, you can only trade 10 units before it moves to the next price.
Oh, on the curve you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I understand what you're putting down.
Okay, yeah. Just the second thing I wanted to mention is I know you're worried about screwing over LPs, and I think like for this to become really massive, I think like you need smart players who are LPing, not just people who are passive, because it just seems like that's the direction that the market's going in. A lot of volume is going towards these dexes that do have concentrated liquidity. And yes, like if you're an LP, then you don't want to do that, then you have savers. Like on the other side of it, a lot of the quote unquote smart guys with the big money guys will be the LPs, and then you could just deposit in savers. So yeah, there's just that side of it.
If you were to add concentrated liquidity in THORChain's model, savers would be included in the people that would profit less, correct? Or no?
Well, I don't know how the fees are actually distributed to savers. Like, is it just a percentage of the entire, like whatever comes in but to the network, like 50% goes to savers, or like there's some details here that
the math works out in the sense that LPs get 100% of the income initially, in a sense. Like all the income comes from into the to the LPs, and the network just tracks like how much in this block, how much did this pool profit? Okay, it made 50 rune worth of value. We'll just call it that, and then we calculate how much synthetics exist in this pool. We'll just call it 50%, just to keep the numbers easy. So half of that 50 rune income goes to the synths, because they have half the depth in this sense. But then you do another divide by 2, because synths only make half of their income. So in the end, you're saying that that the synths are going to earn 12.5 rune in this particular case, and the LPs are going to earn the remainder of that 50, which would be 37.2 or something like this.
Okay, yeah. I mean, savers is going to be a function of whatever total fees are, anyways, right? So like,
yeah, it would be interesting.
Yeah.
In an active model of concentrated liquidity, like because the yield to the LPs is no longer like just consistent, right? Everybody gets the same yield relative to the
exactly.
number of LP units. It would create complexities around how we calculate the yield for savers now, because now it's like either you can constant liquidity doesn't matter to savers, and you still take that 12.5, and then within the dual side LPs, they're splitting the 37.5 relative to their ranges, whether they got like a tight range or a long range in terms of their dual side LP side, and you divvy up that side. And then the savers are just like unaffected by this entire thing, or maybe they are affected if you want to do the math a different way. Like it depends on how you want to approach it.
Yeah, I think like the complexity here of calculating the yield it's definitely more, but I don't know if that should be like a reason to like not do this, considering just how amazing it is like on these other platforms, like how much volume they're able to generate and how much yield they're able to bring to LPs. Like yeah, that calculate you could just do like a running total like of the past 7 days, like the the Savers Vault generated this, and there was this much in the Savers Vault, divide, there you go, there's your yield.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like when it comes to this kind of stuff, this is not really my area of expertise on the project. Lena really understands the stuff more deeply than I do, and she's the one that kind of designed the slip-based fee model itself, and kind of defining how we structure our LPs and LP units and all that kind of stuff. So this is this is not my personal contribution, my personal expertise on the particular project. So Lena would be a better person to talk to about this topic than I would, to be honest with you. But it is an interesting conversation for sure, and I'd love to learn more about it. And if there's things that I'm missing, I'd love to correct my falsehoods.
Yeah. Why don't I DM you? I actually got to take off. But thanks for giving me this much time. I really appreciate it.
DM me and shoot me some links to some articles or whatever that you think would be valuable for me to learn more about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks for coming up, man. I actually there's actually something similar that I've been thinking about for a while that maybe we can just talk about for a little bit, and it's kind of related to this whole topic, which is why I wanted to bring this up now. It's before we get into ADR8, and that's just bringing down. So okay, Jed, you mentioned the virtual pool depth and how we do have a different virtual pool depth for synths, and one of the things I've been thinking about is basically having that apply. Sorry, I'm walking outside right now, so if there's like noise, then just let me know. But yeah, I was thinking about increasing the virtual pool depth for just Savers deposits. So not for synth, any kind of synth transaction or anything like that, but just for Savers deposits and withdrawals. You can set a virtual pool depth of double the current depth, and effectively what you're doing is making it so it takes less fees to deposit Savers or to withdraw Savers. And you can apply similar behavior to something like order books, where I think just the behavior of synths and the fact that you need to pay a full slip-based fee in order to get a synth from the L1 asset is a detriment to the actual adoption of the feature. And obviously we can't remove the fees in total. No, I think we should remove the fees totally, but I think we should look and see like where we can improve in especially like the areas that we want to improve in liquidity. So what's your thoughts about increasing the depth for just like Savers deposits, order books, and like extra features that are on top of Savers, but not on top of synths, but not the actual synths themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I'm open to have like a conversation like that. If we want to make it cheaper for savers to enter and exit the pools, we can like increase the depth of the layer one pools artificially for those particular calculations. Same thing with order books. Although in order books case, like once you have the synth, there's no more fees and other than the actual order that you're placing itself, like the actual trade itself. So within order books, like if you just stay within the synthetic world and you just trade back and forth between Bitcoin and USDC or ETH and USDC or whatever your trading style is, or whatever the hell you want to call it, then then the fees you're paying is just paying synthetic fees, which case I think it's like even cheaper, because I think the fees are cut in half for synthetic trades, just to make it more appetizing for arbitrage bots.
No, synthetic fees are the same as normal swaps, and then that was changed not long after synths came out. I believe they were half for a while, or double the depth, but they're now 1-to-1 with the L1
Yeah,
trades.
I thought we had changed it back because I think that we had put it by half, and then we realized that it was a security problem with manipulating the order in the swap manager, the swap queue, and then we fixed the issue with there was, and I thought we put it back, but maybe we didn't. I can't remember, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's still 1-to-1 with regular trade size. So if you do a swap with L1, obviously you don't pay the outbound as much of a native transaction fee, but there's still all the other considerations. And yeah, so yeah, I just think that'd be an interesting.
You're right, by the way. The virtual multi is set to 1 on the. I just checked the mirrors.
Wait, so you're saying that it could go back to half, like that bug is kind of avoidable in a different way?
Yeah, I think we already fixed the bug. The reason why we took it off to begin with, and then I think the reason why is because instead of doing virtual depths at like twice the depths, whatever, we set the minimum outbound fee to be $1, so that it creates the correct incentives for arbitrage bots to use synthetics over layer ones, because it's faster and cheaper and more effective for the network itself. And so maybe instead of making the swap fees cheaper, we had just set the minimum outbound for TSS signing to be $1.
Yeah, I think that's kind of related to ADR008. But like what I'm saying right now is just looking at that virtual depth and applying it only to extra things on top of synths that we want to incentivize, like order books. And also, I'm curious. I didn't know that order books didn't have an extra fee when you make the swap. I don't think that really makes sense. Why don't you need to pay so you have an L1 and you're placing an order book order. It gets converted to a synth and stored in a module. How are you not paying a second fee when that synth swaps to another asset?
No, in that case you are. If you're going from layer 1 to layer 1 using order books, you are in effect paying like 4 swap fees. Four swap, because you're trading.
Oh, you're talking about if you start with the synth and then you can just place the order with the synth without actually having.
If you're already in the synth world and you're going to and from synths, then you're only paying for the swap that you're making, and therefore it's just as cheap, the same price as anything else for that matter. So it becomes a more or less a free feature in a matter of speaking, in some sense. But like if you're going from layer 1 to layer 1, then you're gonna double swap into a synthetic, and you're gonna wait until your trade is executable, and then it double swaps to the other layer 1, whatever the hell that is.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Let's get started on ADR8 then, because that's kind of related to what we were talking about with the outbound fee. So,
real quick before that, I think Oleg wanted to circle back to finish up on 007. Maybe if you want to chime in on that first.
Yeah, thanks. So just going back to ADR007, so I understood the fund migration and churn interval changes, but in the alternatives considered, it says protocol changes to continue observing retired vaults and make a best effort to refund inbounds if a quorum of nodes of the retiring vault remains. So I just want to insist on that, how I've been always advocating for that, and if there are any risks or complexities, then I'm happy to review my opinion. But if it is offered as a best effort basis, I think it becomes a duty for THORChain to improve of that. I just see so many angles on how you mentioned like interfaces or wallets shouldn't cache that. That's fine, but we can never control like user behavior. And also, as a pure interface at THORSwap, we depend on external wallets. We can't then integrate any wallet we see fit if for some reason there's a behavior that they deem useful in their UX that is just incompatible or that adds tremendous risk when combined with THORChain's model. So I just feel like I don't think there's a perfect solution here, but if on a best effort basis, which I would say looking at the churn rate would be most of the time, if funds could be rescued above a certain amount, and even there could be a fee for the protocol or the nodes for doing so, I just think it becomes much more realistic to kind of erase or mitigate that risk. Because if I'm the product manager of Coinbase DeFi wallet and I'm looking at integrating THORChain to provide BTC to Ether or BTC to stablecoin swaps without relying on the centralized part of the exchange, then I'll probably just like do a risk assessment, and then my dev tells me that if my dev team fucks up, then it can cost me like 250K. That's a no-go. That's a no-go for like all the big organizations, the smaller ones. I remember at some point, we cached it at THORSwap. That was a mistake. It cost us dearly. And then we removed the caching. And for some reason, there was one weird use case where it was still cached. We fucked up again. And then for 4 straight weeks, I would set up alarms in the middle of the night, like when the churn was to happen, just to do a quote or do a trade, just to make sure that our system updated and there was no like outlying flaws. So again, I understand we can't fix stupid from stupid, but I think if there are sensible ways of improving that, I think it should be strongly considered by THORChain.
Yeah, I mean, maybe like the probably the simplest way of solving this problem, or probably the most effective way of solving the problem, more arguably. And I hadn't really thought of it much until you were just speaking there. But is that whenever we monitor the BC1 addresses and ETH addresses and all these things for inbound and outbound transactions and such, and once a vault is emptied, meaning that the migration is done and there's no more funds in it, we basically stop monitoring that particular vault because there's no reason to, because it's no longer part of the network anymore. We've churned, we discarded it, blah blah blah. But hypothetically speaking, we could continue to monitor old vaults, which would, in effect, it would be almost nothing to monitor because there's nothing actually happening with it. But we could monitor it and then say if any vault that ever gets sent funds that the network still has control over, because sometimes it will and sometimes it won't, depending upon how old that particular vault is, like how many churns we've had since then. We can try to make an observation for an inactive or retired vault, and then which just triggers a refund from that same vault, right? And so we just disregard what the intention was if they're trying to swap or whatever, and we just do a refund.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this could be paired or synchronized with each churn. So before doing the actual new churn, you look at all the vaults that the protocol still has access to, and if there are funds there, you just refund them.
Yeah, the problem can become more complicated when like somebody sends USDC, for example, or a BEP2 asset to an old address, and we can't send it back to you because there's no gas asset on that wallet to be able.
Well, that would be to the router, and the router is static, I believe, right? Like that doesn't actually churn with the vaults.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be case for like BEP2 assets, for example.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would still be a considerable improvement over the current situation.
Yeah, and I think I feel like I need to think through it from a security perspective, because I'm feeling there might be some security concerns with doing something like this. But I need to think it through more.
And of course, there could be like we refund like 95%, or we refund 99%, but we take a flat like $20 fee or something like that just to pay for the outbound gas. But not to single out any wallets. It's just that THORSwap, we don't have a wallet. So XDeFi is the most widely used wallet on THORSwap. And then there's this habit or behavior, or I don't know, and sometimes it's weird with multiple monitors. You click on a swap and then it pops behind one of your windows. And then the next morning you wake up and I don't know, you're confused. You didn't have your coffee, whatever. And then you want to do a new swap, but you actually signed the previous swaps. So then funds go to like an expired vault. It's clearly the user's fault. He wasn't careful. But of course they're not going to blame themselves. Like they're going to blame the wallet, the interface, the protocol, whatever. So I strongly think that if there is a solution, it should be pursued.
Yeah, that's something I'll think more on that, about the viability of doing something like this. It is a bit of a funny thing because in general, like blockchains in general, do not try to make any attempts to be like user friendly or like make up for, like if you send money to an OX address that you don't have a private key for, then
why settle for that?
They got to fork the whole code.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's an interesting kind of debate of like uh, how much responsibility does the network have to protect people from themselves?
I think it's more about the protocol's responsibility of making the best UX. Um,
Yeah, and when you talk about best things, UX stuff, sometimes what we're talking about is like protecting the user from fucking something up and burning their own money because they make some boneheaded mistake.
Brought up Chilios too. Hey, you have some thoughts?
Yeah, hello. Yeah, from the THOReau perspective as well, the problem exists on the limitation as well as Ledger, for example, has limitation to some of the parts of the swaps, and later on, not because of the user error, but for example, because of the network goes up high on the gas fees, the transaction goes late, and just treats by not even the being stupid, but just being in the wrong place in the wrong time, and using the basically Ledger wallet, the funds are lost by no mean.
Yeah.
All right, good to move on to 008.
Yep.
All right, ADR008, and this will be the last thing for today. This is dynamic outbound fee multiplier. So right now, the current behavior is THORChain charges 3 times the gas fee for the native chain to send out transactions to that chain. So if you're, say the gas fee is $5 on Ethereum, THORChain charges 15 to send out any transaction, and this. Well, okay, so the current that's the current behavior, and the proposed change is to dynamically change this multiplier depending on how much revenue the protocol has made in measuring it against what it's actually paid versus how much it's made. So what this should do in effect is over the next couple of months bring down gas fees for especially Ethereum and Bitcoin swaps, but it should bring down gas fees to parity of what the network is actually paying over the midterm. The change won't happen right away. The multiplier will continue to adjust downwards until it reaches this equilibrium point, and that is the breadth of the change. So you should see a lower, especially Ethereum, because that is obviously the highest cost gas fee that is on THORChain. So that is the current change, although there is a lot of argument about reserve income, which in my opinion is kind of a separate conversation. This is a change to bring gas fees to parity, but they're kind of conflated because this mechanism does bring income. So there's along with this, there's now some clamoring back and forth about how to make up for that lost reserve income and how to bring just more parity towards where that income is coming from. And those ideas are basically changing the outbound fee. So there's a couple different fees that are charged for each swap, and that's the liquidity fee, the gas fee, and then an additional outbound fee, basically charging for the TSS swap. And so this proposed change, this ADR, changes the behavior of that gas fee. And now, because this change is also taking away income from the reserve, people are suggesting that we find a better way to charge that reserve fee, the outbound fee. So that's not encompassed in this ADR, but I think that's going to have to be another ADR where we figure out how to patch that hole, basically, and continue to bring income to the reserve without just charging Ethereum users for it, because that's essentially what is happening right now. And the result should be a very material cost reduction in Ethereum swaps on THORChain, especially ones where Ethereum is sent out from the network. So like a Bitcoin to Ether swap.
Yeah, one of the kind of interesting things is, assuming this gets merged and adopted and whatever, um, that we were just having a discussion earlier in this conversation about if you drop the fees of a trade, or you get a better execution on your trade, does that cause an increase in trade volume? Right. Like I think that was what our wizard was arguing. Yes, and that's what his argument for concentrated liquidity. So like you could make an argument that making this change where we're going from 3x gas price for Ethereum transactions to 1.5x, which would be basically cut in half more or less. Like does that trigger a larger volume of trades through the Ethereum pool or pools? That'd be an interesting just thing to watch, like a case study.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this mostly affects the smaller swaps. Because you could think about, let's say, $100 swap, in Ethereum, like a $100 Bitcoin to Ethereum swap. So the slippage fee is going to be very low for a trade like that. And that's just because it's a small swap with very deep pools, so there's going to be low slippage. But you're going to be paying a ton in gas fees. So, if you say the gas fee is just, $3 or $4 for the Ethereum network, and then all of a sudden it's three times that. So you're paying, between like 12 and, you say you're paying $15 for the Ethereum gas fee, $15 on a $100 swap. That's 15% of your entire swap. So it's a very significant impact, especially the smaller Ethereum trades. So this should see I think it should see a very material impact on. I don't know if it'll result in increased trade volume through the network, but I think it'll definitely make for much happier traders in the Ethereum pools, because they will be charged much more fairly for gas, and then hopefully we can find a better solution. I think it'll be pretty easy to find a better solution going forward on how to make up that income. And the answer to that is most likely just slightly increasing the outbound fee for all other swaps. So everyone's paying the equal share to the network for the key gen, and sending out for basically processing the transaction. You set that for $1 per swap, and it's already I haven't done the analytics on this, but you're bringing in the income from everybody rather than from just ETH and somewhat Bitcoin swappers. So it seems to be a much more fair change, but there's a lot more. Some people want to figure out how to patch the hole in income to the network as a result of this too. So it's probably going to result in a new ADR to get that solved.
Go ahead, Olga.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to. I don't have as strong as opinion on this one as the previous one, but from an integrator perspective, I know most of the potential partners we speak with, about 50% of them would not have only THORChain as a cross-chain providers, and most of them seems to opt for like comparing quotes from different cross-chain providers, be them decentralized or centralized, and then just offering or suggesting the best one to the users. So my gut feeling would tell me that this wouldn't translate immediately into a trading increase, but I think in the long-term strategy of THORChain being kind of like a DeFi backbone that no one really know they're using it, I think that change still goes well with THORChain becoming the back end of most wallets or DeFi exchanges.
Yeah, in my view, like as somebody who's been around for a long time and helped design and architect this entire thing, this idea that we're trying to address at ADR008 is fixing a design flaw. I consider this to be a design flaw in THORChain, and the fact that basically we're making an income to the reserve that is relational to the gas cost of a particular chain, and that really doesn't make any sense to me. And I think it's just something that I had overlooked, in the earlier years, like back in 2019 and 2020, when myself and Lena were architecting all these things and whiteboarding everything. And so to me, I'm excited to see this happen, just because this fixes an unfairness that we have in the design. And I love to see it just get fixed and addressed. And so that way, whatever income we're paying into the reserve to top that up, which is something we want and need to have into the future, then it's just done equally across in a chain agnostic way where everybody's paying a fair and equal share.
Yep, I think it should lead to much more fair behavior, and yeah, I'm definitely in favor of bringing down the Ethereum fees to parity, and I think anyone that's has made a swap using Ethereum knows how expensive those fees are, and anything we can do to bring it down to more sustainable levels, I think is going to be a huge win for the network on the long term. So yeah, looking forward to that, and I think that just brings us, especially with Ethereum being one of our deepest pools, it's going to be a huge benefit to the network because it improves the user experience of our second deepest pool by depth. So I can't see anything but good things coming out of that.
So another interesting thing relating to this, or in parallel to this, that we actually never talked about this publicly. But it's relating to this, that whenever we do charge gas fees, we always put up like 1.5x whatever the Ethereum or Bitcoin gas currently is. And the reason why it's 1.5 and not 1.0 is because we want to make sure that when we broadcast a transaction, we're executing a swap, that we get into the next block as reasonably as fast as possible. We don't want to be like delayed for, 45 minutes because we're always waiting because of the gas fees that all of a sudden increased on Ethereum or whatever. And by putting it 1.5x, we're more likely to be in the next block, right? Statistically speaking, and therefore we don't need to worry about other things downstream about broadcasting a transaction to the mempool, and then for a chain that we're not monitoring the mempool, then reschedule for another Asgard, and then double spend ourselves and that kind of thing. So it'd be interesting if we kind of explored more about like ways we can push the envelope and go from 1.5x down to closer to 1x without taking on the risk of a potential double spend. And if we could do that, we could even further cheapen the fees paid in a swap or trade.
Yeah, and specifically integrators have been asking for this and asking because a lot of them are used to very EVM-centric networks that don't really have to deal with this gas fee issue, and there's really not a lot of networks that do have to deal with the gas fee issues like this. I've even seen Chainflip in their recent spaces. They've been discussing how to handle this same exact issue that we are. It's a cross-chain problem that no one has really solved, and I think this is a very reasonable solution to get there. Where the network determines how much it's spent on gas fees and how much it's charged for gas fees, and tries to bring that as close to parity as possible. So I think the changes make a ton of sense, and hopefully we can get something like this through. And then over the next, it'll take time for this to come into effect because I'm not exactly 100% sure how the mechanism works, but as there's a greater and greater profit, it slowly brings that multiplier down. And then eventually it should reach parity. So we're talking about over the period of 1 to 2 months to get down to a 1x gas fee. And then it should just dynamically adjust itself as time goes on. So yeah, I think that's pretty much the breadth of ADR8. So yeah, I think that's pretty much the major stuff covered. ADR7 and 8. I think there's going to be a vote on both of them probably fairly soon. End up maybe in ADR9 discussing the reserve income and adjusting the outbound fee.
Yeah, that one's an interesting one. I think that'd be a more interesting debate because it's much more subjective about what the reserve income should be and how much, like who's paying that reserve income. That'd be an interesting conversation when that gets ready.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense to lump them all together. It's definitely a separate issue, but because there's so many ways to bring income to the reserve that I think it'll be a much longer and more in-depth conversation, and it's not one that needs to be solved today, where it's like ETH fees are an issue that we could solve today, so we should solve it today. But then the reserve income, that's an issue over the period of multiple years, not something that has any like real material effect on the network like today or tomorrow. While something like decreasing the Ethereum outbound fees does have a material effect today and tomorrow. So
absolutely
cool. Any other stuff you guys wanted to discuss, or anyone want to come up for questions?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything for me. I don't know if anyone in the audience does.
Yep, same here. Looks like no requests, so I think we're good to call it.
Cool. All right. Sweet, guys. Every Friday. See you probably next week. And Friday is at 12 p.m. Eastern time. And we'll upload this on YouTube later today. And have a great weekend, everybody. See ya.
Bye, guys.
See you guys.
Thanks, bye-bye.